Welcome to the extremely boring stories. Today we listening Genghis Khan and his Mongol Empire, before the Khan, life on the steppe. The land that made him. Before you ever hear the name Genghis Khan, before banners move and cities burn, you are standing on grass. Endless grass. Not farmland, not pasture in the neat sense, but steppe, flat, rolling land where the horizon never seems closer no matter how long you ride toward it. This is Central Asia in the late 12th century. There are no borders here that you would recognize. No stone markers, no fences. What defines space is memory, where your clan camped last winter, where the river froze late, where a rival once ambushed your uncle. Land is not owned, it is used, and only as long as you can defend your right to pass through it. Life here is quiet, repetitive, and hard. Most days are spent doing things that never make it into heroic stories. You milk animals, mares, sheep, goats. You dry meat in the wind. You repair saddles. You check the weather constantly, because weather is the real ruler of the steppe. A sudden winter storm can kill entire herds. A dry summer can starve a clan without a single enemy lifting a weapon. You live in a ger, a felt tent that can be dismantled in under an hour. This is not because you love travel. It is because staying still is dangerous. Pasture runs out. Neighbors notice weakness. Mobility is survival. Children learn to ride before they learn to read, if they ever learn to read at all. Literacy exists far away, in China, Persia, and the Islamic cities to the west. Here, knowledge is oral. Genealogies are memorized. Alliances are remembered. Insults are never forgotten. Violence is not constant, but it is always possible. Raids are small, practical affairs. A few horses stolen at night. A woman taken. A man killed because he resisted or because someone needed to send a message. There are no large battles yet, no grand strategy. Just survival. This is the world Temujin is born into around 1162. His father is a minor clan leader. Not powerful. Not secure. One day, while returning from arranging a marriage for his son, he is poisoned by rivals. Temujin is still a boy. The clan abandons his family almost immediately. This is not cruelty by their standards, it is logic. A widow and her children are a burden. On the steppe, weakness spreads. You can imagine the silence after they leave. The wind. The animals grazing elsewhere. A family suddenly alone. For years, Temujin's family survives on roots, fish, and scraps. Hunger shapes everything. His mother teaches discipline. She teaches endurance. She teaches him that alliances matter more than affection, and that betrayal is not shocking, it is normal. Temujin kills his half-brother during a dispute over food. This is not framed as a moral crisis. It is framed as necessity. There will be no space in his future thinking for sentimentality. As you lie listening to this story, it is easy to imagine conquest as something dramatic and sudden. But the Mongol Empire begins here, in cold mornings and small humiliations. In the knowledge that nothing is permanent, not loyalty, not safety, not even family. The steppe produces people who think in terms of systems rather than places. You do not defend walls, you defend relationships. You do not govern land, you govern movement. You do not rely on surplus, you rely on speed. Every adult male is a potential soldier, but not because of ideology. Because he already owns the most important military equipment, a horse, a bow, and the ability to survive with almost nothing. There are no supply lines here. There is no baggage train. Each man carries dried meat, fermented mare's milk, and knows how to bleed a horse without killing it. This lifestyle is not romantic. It is exhausting. It leaves little time for art, for monuments, for writing history down. That is why steppe peoples are often treated as interruptions in other civilizations' stories rather than as civilizations themselves. But you should notice something important. This world produces people who are flexible, patient, and ruthless when required. It produces leaders who understand that power comes from organization, not display. When Temujin begins gathering followers, he does not promise glory. He promises stability. He punishes betrayal consistently. He rewards loyalty regardless of birth. This is unusual. Steppe society is rigidly hierarchical by clan. Temujin quietly undermines this by promoting people based on usefulness. At first, this does not look like revolution. It looks like pragmatism. The steppe does not care about your title. It cares whether you can keep people alive through winter. Loyalty, betrayal, and the mathematics of survival. When you wake up on the steppe, one question quietly sits beneath everything else: who will still stand with you tomorrow? Not because people are naturally disloyal, but because loyalty here is conditional. It depends on strength, usefulness, and timing. This is the social arithmetic Temujin grows up learning, long before he ever leads an army. In settled societies, loyalty is reinforced by institutions, laws, courts, written contracts, temples, bureaucrats. On the steppe, there are none of these. There is memory, reputation, and fear of retaliation. Agreements are personal and fragile. They last only as long as both sides believe the balance still favors cooperation. As a young man, Temujin begins rebuilding his position through marriage. His wife, Bardi, comes from a respected clan. This alliance matters more than affection, though affection may exist. It gives him a foothold. It signals legitimacy. In steppe politics, marriage is diplomacy without paperwork. Then Bardi is kidnapped by a rival group. This is not unusual. Women are strategic assets. Losing a wife is losing status, labor, and alliance ties. Temujin does something important here. He asks for help. He approaches Khan, an older leader who once had ties to his father, and Jamika, a childhood friend who belongs to a powerful lineage. This moment matters not because of heroics, but because it reveals how power works. Temujin cannot act alone. He negotiates, promises loyalty, accepts subordinate status. Bardi is rescued. The system works, for now. But systems on the steppe rarely remain stable. Jamika and Temujin drift apart. Not over ideology, but over structure. Jamika believes in traditional aristocracy, rule by noble lineage. Temujin believes in competence. He promotes men who prove themselves, regardless of birth. This creates quiet resentment. It also attracts followers who have nothing to lose. When conflict comes, it is not framed as good versus evil. It is framed as which model of leadership produces survival. Jamika's followers leave when conditions worsen. Temujin's followers stay because leaving offers no advantage. You should imagine these early conflicts not as sweeping battles, but as slow erosion. Camps attacked at night. Herds stolen. Messengers intercepted. Winter starvation used as a weapon. This is warfare measured in months, not hours. Temujin learns something crucial here: punishment must be predictable. Mercy can exist, but only when it strengthens control. Betrayal must be absolute in its consequences, not emotional, not excessive, just final. This consistency becomes one of his defining traits. Unlike other steppe leaders, he begins reorganizing people not by clan, but by decimal units, groups of 10, 100, 1,000. This breaks old loyalties and replaces them with functional ones. You now depend on men who were once strangers. Your survival is tied to cooperation, not ancestry. This sounds administrative because it is. The Mongol Empire will later terrify the world, but its foundation is paperwork without paper, systems memorized, enforced, and repeated. Religion, too, plays a quiet role here. The steppe is religiously flexible. Shamanism exists, but it does not demand exclusivity. Spirits inhabit rivers, mountains, ancestors. There is no priestly class with political power. Temujin does not rule by divine command. He rules by results. This matters later, when conquered peoples are allowed to keep their faiths. But here, it simply means that belief does not override practicality. If a shaman's prophecy fails, the shaman loses influence. There is no protection from accountability. As Temujin grows stronger, People begin joining him not because he promises wealth, but because he offers predictability. He redistributes captured goods fairly. He forbids kidnapping within his group. He protects families of fallen soldiers. These are small policies, but they matter deeply in a world where insecurity is normal. You should not imagine enthusiasm. You should imagine relief. The steppe has seen many leaders. Most burn bright and vanish. Temujin feels different because he reduces uncertainty. Under him, life is still hard, but it is less arbitrary. His enemies notice this. They respond by forming coalitions. But coalitions on the steppe are brittle. Each leader worries about the others gaining advantage. Coordination fails. Temujin waits. He does not rush decisive battles. He lets hunger, fear, and mistrust weaken his opponents. This patience is learned. It comes from years of scarcity. When you have survived winters with nothing, time becomes a resource you know how to use. Eventually, Genghis is captured. He asks for a noble death, without bloodshed, according to steppe tradition. Temujin grants it. This is not kindness. It is respect for norms that still matter. He understands when tradition stabilizes rule, and when it must be broken. By the time Temujin is proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler in 1206, the steppe is already transformed. Not by conquest of cities, but by reorganization of people. Clan loyalty has been weakened. Merit has replaced ancestry. Violence has become regulated. This moment is often presented as a beginning. In reality, it is a conclusion. The steppe phase is complete. The machinery is built. What comes next will shock the world, but it is assembled quietly, through routines, habits, and expectations formed long before any wall is breached. Temujin becomes Genghis Khan. The title that changed nothing, and everything. By the year 1206, Temujin is no longer a desperate boy eating roots by a riverbank. He is also not yet the world conqueror history later imagines. He is something quieter and, in many ways, more dangerous, a man who has solved the problem of power on the steppe. The gathering where he receives the title Genghis Khan takes place at a kurultai, a council of leaders held in the open, with no buildings, no throne, no fixed center. You should picture horses grazing nearby, smoke from cooking fires drifting sideways in the wind, men standing rather than sitting. This is not a coronation in the settled sense. It is a public acknowledgement that resistance has become impractical. When the title is spoken, it does not immediately change Temujin's behavior. That is important. There is no sudden shift in tone, no dramatic speech promising conquest. The systems are already in place. The title simply formalizes what already exists. But names matter. Genghis Khan does not mean emperor in the sedentary sense. It signals scope. It suggests authority that crosses clan boundaries, rivers, and seasonal pastures. It is a claim that there is now one ultimate point of decision-making. On the steppe, this is unprecedented. Until now, leadership has always been fragmented. Alliances formed and dissolved. Even powerful leaders ruled through persuasion rather than command. Genghis Khan introduces something new, obedience as a norm rather than an exception. You should not imagine people cheering. This is not enthusiasm. This is calculation. Many of the men present have fought against him before. They have lost relatives, herds, status. They are here because the alternative, continued instability, is worse. Genghis Khan understands this psychology well. He does not immediately demand more than people can give. He confirms existing commanders in their roles. He distributes rewards in predictable ways. He emphasizes continuity. Then, slowly, he begins to centralize authority. The key instrument for this is law. The Yasa, often described as a legal code, is not written down at first. It exists as a collection of remembered rules, enforced by precedent. Its content is practical rather than moral. It governs theft, desertion, adultery, hunting rights, military discipline. Many of its rules seem harsh, but their real function is clarity. If you steal from within the group, the punishment is severe. If you steal from an enemy, it is expected. If you desert in battle, death follows. If you follow orders and fail, you are protected. This distinction matters. Genghis Khan removes ambiguity from survival. People know where they stand. He also does something radical. He declares that loyalty to him supersedes loyalty to clan. This is not framed as ideology. It is framed as efficiency. Clans have proven unreliable. Personal loyalty to a leader who enforces fairness is more stable. To make this real, he restructures the army permanently. Units are no longer assembled only for campaigns. They exist year-round. Commanders are appointed, not inherited. Promotions come from demonstrated ability, tracking, organization, discipline, not noble birth. You might expect resistance. Instead, there is adaptation. For men from minor or marginal backgrounds, this system is an opportunity. For aristocrats, it is an adjustment. Some leave. Many stay, recognizing that opposition now carries unacceptable risk. Women's roles also change subtly. While warfare remains male-dominated, women manage camps, herds, logistics, and family networks. Genghis Khan's wives and daughters are trusted administrators. They oversee territories, control resources, and manage diplomacy while men are away campaigning. This is not progressive by modern standards. But it is functional. The Mongol system does not waste capable people. As ruler of the steppe, Genghis Khan now faces a choice. He could stabilize what he has built and rule as a regional power. Or he could expand. Expansion is not driven by abstract ambition. It is driven by pressure. The steppe cannot support unlimited population growth. Pasture is finite. Conflict with neighboring groups is inevitable. Trade with settled societies exists, but it is unstable, often blocked by hostile states or corrupt officials. To the south lies the Jin dynasty, ruling northern China. To the west, wealthy Muslim states control key trade routes. These societies see the steppe as peripheral, barbaric, useful only as a source of horses or mercenaries. Genghis Khan understands something they do not, that his society is already militarized, already mobile, already organized. What looks primitive is actually efficient. The first external campaigns are cautious. Border raids. Probing attacks. Intelligence gathering. Genghis Khan sends merchants as much as soldiers. He studies responses. He notes weaknesses. When Jin officials insult his envoys, he does not react immediately. He remembers. When trade agreements are broken, he does not negotiate endlessly. He prepares. This patience is misunderstood later as cunning genius. In reality, it is habit. On the steppe, rash action kills you. Waiting keeps you alive. When war finally comes, it is devastating not because of numbers, but because of discipline. Mongol forces move faster than expected. They communicate over long distances using relay riders. They feign retreat, draw enemies out, then encircle them. But even here, you should resist the temptation to see spectacle. Most Mongol warfare is repetitive. Ride. Scout. Surround. Cut off supplies. Wait. Attack when resistance collapses. Cities are shocked not by violence alone, but by predictability. If a city surrenders early, it is often spared. If it resists, punishment is total. This pattern spreads fear faster than any rumor. Genghis Khan does not enjoy destruction. It is simply a tool. Terror reduces future resistance. Reduced resistance saves Mongol lives. This logic is cold, but consistent. As ruler, he also listens. He employs foreign advisors, Chinese engineers, Muslim administrators, scribes from conquered lands. He does not insist on Mongol superiority in knowledge, only in command. This flexibility becomes a defining feature of the empire. Mongols rule, but they do not micromanage. They demand tribute, loyalty, and military support. Local systems are often left intact. You should notice how unromantic this is. There is no grand ideology of empire. There is no vision of cultural conversion. There is only function. By the time Genghis Khan is universally acknowledged as ruler of the Mongols, the question is no longer whether he will expand, but how far this system can stretch before it breaks. Ruling people who do not know you. Once Temujin becomes Genghis Khan, the most difficult problem is no longer defeating enemies. It is governing people who have never seen him, never met him, and may never hear his voice. On the steppe, leadership is personal. Authority comes from presence, being seen, being known, being remembered. An empire breaks that logic. You cannot ride everywhere. You cannot personally reward loyalty or punish betrayal once your territory stretches beyond seasonal migration routes. Genghis Khan understands this limitation early, and instead of fighting it, he redesigns authority to function without him. The solution is delegation without dilution. He appoints commanders not as regional kings, but as extensions of his will. They do not own land. They do not rule populations in their own name. They command units, collect tribute, enforce law. Their power depends entirely on continued loyalty. If they fail, they are replaced. If they rebel, their families are not protected by status. This creates a system that discourages ambition beyond assigned roles. You might think this would produce fear alone. It does, but it also produces clarity. Everyone knows the limits of their authority. No one pretends to sovereignty. To maintain this, Genghis Khan does something counterintuitive. He limits Mongol settlement in conquered cities. Mongols remain a ruling minority, mobile and separate. They do not assimilate quickly. This prevents them from becoming attached to local politics or local identities. Governance is indirect. Local administrators, Chinese officials, Persian tax collectors, Turkic scribes, continue their work. They are supervised, audited, and occasionally executed if they cheat. But their expertise is valued. Genghis Khan understands that running a city requires skills the steppe does not teach. This is not tolerance in a moral sense. It is efficiency. Taxes are standardized. Census-taking begins. Populations are counted not for representation, but for logistics. How many men can be conscripted, how much grain can be extracted without collapse, how many artisans should be relocated. Artisans matter greatly. Skilled workers are spared during sackings and sent east. Metal workers, engineers, weavers, doctors, all are assets. Ordinary populations are replaceable. Skills are not. This utilitarian view shocks contemporaries, but it is systematic. Destruction is not random. It is selective. You should imagine empire building here not as a series of battles, but as endless administrative decisions. Who moves where? Who pays how much? Which road is repaired? Which messenger route is reinforced? Which commander is rotated to prevent local loyalty forming? The famous Mongol postal system, the Yam, expands rapidly. Relay stations are built every few dozen kilometers. Horses are kept ready. Messengers travel day and night. Orders move faster than armies. Speed becomes governance. When rebellion occurs, response is swift. Not necessarily large, but decisive. A city that revolts after surrender is treated differently from one that resists initially. The message is consistent: initial defiance is understandable, betrayal is unforgivable. Fear spreads not through chaos, but through memory. Religion continues to be ignored as a basis for rule. Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, Taoists, all exist under Mongol authority. No conversions are demanded. Clergy are often exempted from taxation. This earns goodwill, but more importantly, it prevents religious resistance from unifying populations. Divisions are preserved. Genghis Khan also codifies succession rules, though imperfectly. He understands that his death will destabilize everything. Yet even here, tradition and innovation collide. The steppe values consensus among elites, not strict primogeniture. This ambiguity will later fracture the empire. For now, his authority holds. What is remarkable is how little ceremony surrounds his rule. There are no capitals at first. No monumental architecture. Power moves with the ruler. Decisions are made in tense. Orders are delivered verbally, then remembered. This absence of visible statehood causes outsiders to underestimate the system. They mistake lack of ornament for lack of organization. They assume barbarism where there is structure. They learn otherwise too late. By the time neighboring states understand what they face, Mongol armies are already inside their borders, cutting communication, isolating cities, turning geography into a weapon. Yet from the Mongol perspective, this is not conquest for glory. It is risk management. Leaving hostile states intact invites future raids. Securing trade routes ensures steady flow of goods. Eliminating unreliable neighbors reduces uncertainty. Everything serves stability. As you listen to this, you may feel a quiet discomfort. This empire is not driven by madness or passion. It is driven by logic applied without restraint. How nomads fought empires. War without walls. Before you imagine great battles, banners, or burning cities, you need to adjust how you think about war itself. Empires fight wars of position. Nomads fight wars of movement. These two ideas are not just different, they are almost incompatible. If you live inside walls, war comes to you. If you live on the steppe, war is something you carry with you. Nomadic warfare does not begin with declarations or marching columns. It begins with watching. Mongol scouts ride far ahead of any army, sometimes weeks in advance. They do not look for enemies to fight. They look for roads, rivers, grazing land, granaries, and habits. They note how often guards change. They observe how cities respond to rumors. Information is the first weapon. To settled empires, this kind of intelligence feels invisible. They are used to armies that announce themselves, standards raised, supply wagons creaking, infantry moving at walking pace. Mongol forces do not behave like this. They break into small units, spread across wide areas, and communicate constantly through riders. You should imagine the frustration of an imperial general. Reports arrive late. The enemy appears in one place, then disappears. Villages are raided, but no army can be pinned down. Supplies vanish. Roads become unsafe. This is not chaos. It is deliberate pressure. Nomads do not seek immediate confrontation. They seek imbalance. They want you tired, uncertain, and isolated before a single decisive engagement occurs. The Mongol army is built around the horse, but not in the way popular imagination suggests. Horses are not just mounts, they are infrastructure. Each warrior brings multiple horses. They rotate them. This allows continuous movement without exhaustion. Imperial cavalry cannot match this endurance. Their horses are fewer, heavier, and dependent on supply. Mongol soldiers do not need wagons. They carry dried meat. They drink fermented mare's milk. They can bleed a horse for nourishment without killing it. Their logistics move at the speed of riding, not marching. This means something important. Mongol armies do not have a vulnerable rear. There is no single supply line to cut. There is no depot to capture. Every soldier is semi-autonomous. Empires are not designed to fight this. When battle does happen, it often looks wrong to imperial observers. Mongol units retreat suddenly, sometimes after only brief contact. This is not panic. It is invitation. Opposing forces pursue, breaking formation, leaving prepared positions. Then the Mongols turn. Encirclement follows. Arrows rain in from distance. Mongol composite bows outrange most enemy weapons. They are accurate on horseback, at speed. The goal is not immediate slaughter. It is exhaustion and confusion. Once formation collapses, resistance ends quickly. You should not imagine shouting and heroic charges. You should imagine silence punctuated by arrows. You should imagine man dying without ever seeing the enemy clearly. Cities respond differently. Walls stop horses. Nomads historically avoid sieges. But the Mongols adapt. They do not suddenly become expert builders, they recruit experts. Engineers from China, Persia, and Central Asia are forced into service. Siege engines appear where no one expects them. This shocks city defenders. Nomads are supposed to lack patience. Instead, Mongols wait. They cut water. They isolate cities from allies. They allow hunger and fear to work. And here, policy matters as much as tactics. If a city surrenders early, its population is often spared. Tribute is imposed. Administrators are replaced or supervised. Life continues, altered but intact. If a city resists and loses, destruction follows. Not because of anger, but because memory is useful. News travels faster than armies. One annihilated city saves future battles. This is psychological warfare, but not theatrical. It is consistent. Predictability is terrifying. Empires struggle with this because they are built on assumptions of control. They believe land, once governed, remains governed. The Mongols treat land as temporary. Control is renewed constantly through movement and enforcement. Another imperial weakness is hierarchy. Orders travel slowly. Generals wait for approval. Initiative is discouraged. Mongol commanders are expected to act independently within clear strategic limits. This flexibility allows rapid response to unexpected situations. You should notice something subtle here. Mongol warfare is not reckless. It is risk-averse. Battles are avoided unless advantage is overwhelming. Losses are minimized. Lives are not spent for honor. This is deeply unsettling to imperial cultures that celebrate sacrifice and bravery. The Mongols do not care how a battle looks. They care how it ends. As the Mongols begin fighting large empires, these differences compound. The bigger the empire, the slower it moves. The more rigid its systems, the easier they are to disrupt. Nomads do not defeat empires by becoming like them. They defeat empires by refusing to fight on imperial terms. Turning geography into a weapon. Once you understand how nomads move, the next thing to notice is how they use space itself. Empires think in terms of territory, provinces, borders, fortified lines. Nomads think in terms of distance, season, and access. The Mongols do not conquer land first, they conquer movement. You begin to see this in how campaigns are timed. Mongol armies do not march when it is convenient for their enemies. They move when rivers freeze, when grass is available, when harvests have just filled granaries. Winter, which paralyzes many imperial forces, becomes an advantage. Frozen rivers turn into highways. Snow preserves meat. Cold weakens defenders behind walls. This timing feels unfair to settled states. It violates their expectations of campaigning seasons. But it is not cleverness in isolation, it is lived experience. Steppe life has always required seasonal thinking. War simply follows the same rhythm. Routes matter more than destinations. Mongol scouts map roads and river crossings long before armies arrive. They know where carts will bog down, where bridges are weak, where water sources are scarce. They exploit these constraints relentlessly. You should imagine an imperial commander trying to defend a frontier. His maps show borders. The Mongols ignore them. They appear deep inside territory, bypassing strong points, attacking logistics rather than defenses. This creates panic. Cities that believe themselves safe suddenly realize they are isolated. Messengers fail to arrive. Relief armies move too slowly. The empire's own size becomes a liability. The Mongols also divide their forces strategically. Multiple columns advance along different routes, separated by great distances. To defenders, this looks like fragmentation. In reality, it is coordination. Columns communicate through riders and signals. If one meets resistance, others adjust. This forces imperial commanders into impossible choices. Defend everything and defend nothing, or concentrate and leave gaps. Every response creates vulnerability. Even retreat becomes a weapon. Mongol units withdraw deliberately, drawing enemies into unfamiliar terrain. Forests, deserts, mountain passes, all are used to break formation and morale. Pursuers find themselves hungry, lost, harassed, and then surrounded. You should not imagine heroic last stands. You should imagine officers losing control of their units, soldiers arguing, supplies running out, discipline eroding. Collapse happens long before defeat is formally recognized. The Mongols also understand information asymmetry. They spread rumors intentionally. Exaggerated numbers. Tales of cruelty. Stories of invincibility. Refugees are allowed to flee, not out of mercy, but to carry fear with them. Fear travels faster than horses. At the same time, Mongol diplomacy remains active. Envoys are sent with clear terms: submit and live, resist and be destroyed. These are not threats. They are forecasts. Cities that observe what has happened elsewhere often choose submission. Empires misread this. They see submission as weakness. In fact, it is rational adaptation. Mongol rule, while harsh, often preserves local elites who cooperate. Taxes may even be lighter than under previous regimes, at least initially. Geography is also used internally. Conquered populations are moved deliberately. Skilled workers are relocated far from their homelands, reducing rebellion. Entire communities are transplanted to serve economic or strategic purposes. This movement disrupts identity. People lose local cohesion. Resistance becomes harder to organize. The empire becomes a mosaic of displaced groups with limited capacity for unified action. You may find this unsettling, and it should be. This is control through dislocation. It works precisely because it is boring, administrative, and persistent. What emerges is a form of warfare that never truly ends. Even after a region is conquered, pressure continues. Patrols ride. Census takers count. Tribute is extracted. Memory of punishment is kept alive. Empires expect peace after war. The Mongols expect maintenance. Law without cities, the Yasa. Rules that traveled on horseback. If you are used to thinking of law as something fixed, written on stone, stored in buildings, guarded by officials, then the Mongol idea of law will feel strange. There are no courthouses on the steppe. No archives. No judges sitting behind desks. And yet, under Genghis Khan, the Mongol world becomes more rule-bound than many settled empires. This system is known as the Yasa. It is often described as a law code, but that description is misleading. The Yasa is not a single document. It is not publicly displayed. Most people never hear all of it at once. It exists as remembered rules, enforced through habit, repetition, and fear of consequence. In other words, it lives inside people. This makes sense when you think about how Mongols live. A written law assumes permanence: buildings that stand, cities that endure, officials who stay in place. Nomadic life offers none of this. Camps move. Leaders travel. Records would be lost, damaged, ignored. So the law moves too. The Yasa governs things that matter in a mobile, militarized society. Loyalty, theft, discipline, hunting, family relations, military conduct. It is not concerned with philosophy or justice in the abstract. It is concerned with survival and order. If you steal from within the Mongol community, punishment is severe. Theft undermines trust, and trust is the foundation of a society without walls. If you steal from an enemy, it is permitted, even expected. The distinction is clear and absolute. If you desert your unit in battle, death follows. If your commander gives a bad order and you obey, you are not punished for the outcome. Responsibility flows upward. This is critical. It encourages obedience without fear of arbitrary blame. You begin to see a pattern here. The Yasa removes ambiguity. People know exactly which behaviors threaten the group and which do not. Adultery is punished harshly, not for moral reasons, but because it creates internal conflict. Hunting rules are enforced strictly, because reckless hunting endangers food supply. Even washing practices and treatment of water sources are regulated, because contamination can spread disease through camps. To an outsider, this can look obsessive or cruel. To someone living on the steppe, it looks like risk management. Enforcement is collective. There is no separate police force. Commanders enforce rules within their units. Families are held responsible for members' actions in certain cases. This shared responsibility strengthens compliance. No one wants to suffer for someone else's mistake. Importantly, the Yasa applies to Mongols first. This is not a law imposed mainly on conquered peoples. It is a disciplined system for the ruling group. Genghis Khan understands that controlling his own followers is harder, and more important, than controlling outsiders. This is why Mongol elites are punished publicly when they violate rules. Status does not excuse disobedience. In fact, higher status brings higher scrutiny. This reinforces the idea that loyalty is to the system, not to privilege. The Yasa also regulates reward. Spoils are distributed according to rules. Looting without permission is forbidden. This prevents internal competition and violence. Everyone knows they will receive a share if they wait. This may sound minor, but it is revolutionary. Many armies collapse not from enemy action, but from infighting over plunder. The Yasa neutralizes this risk. As Mongol forces expand beyond the steppe, the Yasa travels with them. It is enforced in deserts, forests, mountains, and cities. It does not replace local laws for conquered populations, but it governs Mongol behavior everywhere. This separation matters. Mongols rule others, but they rule themselves first. Foreign administrators are often surprised by this. They expect arbitrary violence. Instead, they encounter consistency. Brutal consistency, yes, but consistency nonetheless. This predictability is what allows the empire to function without heavy bureaucracy. People do not need to read the law. They observe it. They hear stories of enforcement. They internalize expectations. Fear plays a role, but not fear of randomness. Fear of certainty. As you lie with this idea, notice how different this is from modern assumptions. We often associate law with civilization and nomadism with chaos. The Yasa reverses this. It is a legal system designed specifically for movement, not permanence. Order stronger than memory. Once the Mongol Empire moves beyond the steppe, the Yasa faces a quiet problem. It was designed for a society where everyone shares the same habits, the same risks, the same understanding of survival. Now it must function across deserts, forests, river valleys, and cities full of people who have never ridden a horse or slept in a felt tent. And yet, it does. This is not because conquered populations suddenly adopt Mongol law. Most never do. The Yasa is not imposed wholesale on subject peoples. Instead, it governs the rulers, the Mongols themselves, wherever they go. This distinction is crucial. In cities, local law continues. Courts remain. Taxes are collected according to familiar systems. Religious judges operate as before. To many civilians, Mongol rule initially feels less intrusive than expected. The shock comes not from daily governance, but from enforcement when lines are crossed. The Yasa operates like a spine running through the empire. You may not see it, but everything depends on it staying rigid. Mongol commanders carry its authority with them. They are expected to remember it accurately and enforce it consistently. This creates a strange phenomenon. Law becomes something you watch rather than read. You learn what the rules are by observing who is punished, how, and why. Stories circulate. A noble executed for stealing from a fellow Mongol. A general demoted for disobeying orders. A soldier spared because he followed instructions exactly, even though the outcome was disastrous. These stories travel faster than official proclamations. Memory becomes infrastructure. One of the most powerful aspects of the Yasa is its treatment of hierarchy. Rank exists, but it does not shield misconduct. In fact, violations by elites are punished more harshly, precisely because their behavior sets precedent. This sends a clear message: authority does not come with immunity. To many settled societies, this feels contradictory. Empires often rely on privilege to maintain loyalty. The Mongols rely on discipline. Loyalty is earned through predictability, not indulgence. Another aspect of the Yasa that becomes more visible as the empire grows is its obsession with coordination. Hunting laws, for example, are enforced even during campaigns. Large communal hunts are conducted with military precision. Breaking formation, hunting independently, or acting selfishly is punished. This may seem irrelevant to conquest, but it is not. Hunting is training. It teaches obedience, timing, patience, and collective action. The same skills apply to warfare. The Yasa ensures that even leisure reinforces discipline. As the empire expands, enforcement becomes more decentralized. Genghis Khan cannot personally oversee every punishment. This introduces risk. If commanders begin interpreting the law differently, consistency erodes. To counter this, punishments are public and exemplary. Severity is not hidden. This is not sadism, it is communication. One execution prevents many violations. One spared offender creates uncertainty. Fear here is not emotional, it is instructional. The Yasa also governs succession, though imperfectly. It establishes that the empire is collective property of the ruling family, not the personal possession of one heir. This avoids immediate civil war but plants seeds of future fragmentation. Consensus is required. Rivalries are inevitable. For now, the system holds because Genghis Khan is alive. He embodies the law. His decisions become precedent. His judgment resolves ambiguity. People obey not because they love him, but because the system still feels coherent. This reveals a deeper truth about the Yasa: it is not independent of power. It does not constrain the ruler in the modern sense. It expresses his priorities. As long as the ruler is strong, the law feels stable. When strength fades, interpretation multiplies. You should notice how fragile this makes the system in the long term. Written laws endure beyond individuals. Oral systems depend on continuity of authority. The Mongols compensate for this through ritual, repetition, and punishment, but they cannot eliminate the risk entirely. As generations pass, the Yasa becomes more myth than memory. Different Khans claim different interpretations. What was once clear becomes negotiable. Law begins to serve politics rather than restrain it. But in this moment, during expansion, the Yasa is at its most effective. It binds a mobile ruling class together across vast distances. It prevents fragmentation while the empire is still growing. And it does something else quietly but powerfully: it makes Mongol behavior legible. Enemies learn what to expect. Allies learn how to survive. Submission becomes a rational choice because the rules, however harsh, are consistent. As you sit with this, consider the paradox. The Mongols, often remembered as agents of chaos, build one of the most disciplined legal cultures of their time. Not through philosophy, not through institutions, but through shared memory and uncompromising enforcement. Which leads to an unsettling reflection. Horses, milk, and survival. Living on what moves. If you strip away the battles, the laws, and the titles, the Mongol Empire still rests on three things: animals, routine, and restraint. Not gold. Not cities. Not monuments. Empires usually grow rich before they grow large. The Mongols grow large first, while remaining materially poor by settled standards. Their power comes from living lightly. At the center of this life is the horse. Not as a symbol, but as a tool. Mongols do not admire horses the way knights do. They depend on them the way sailors depend on ships. A Mongol family owns several horses per person. They are not bred for beauty. They are small, sturdy, resistant to cold, capable of surviving on sparse grass. You ride one horse until it tires, then switch. You do not stop unless you must. You know which horse can gallop, which can carry weight, which is best in snow. This knowledge is not written. It is absorbed from childhood. The horse gives speed, but also food. Mongols drink airbag, fermented mare's milk. It is mildly alcoholic, sour, and nutritious. It preserves calories and fluids in a form that lasts. When meat is needed, a horse can be bled carefully, providing sustenance without killing the animal. This sounds unpleasant, but it is efficient. No storage. No waste. Meat is dried into strips that last for months. Fat is saved. Bones are cracked for marrow. Nothing is decorative. Everything has a use. Hunger is always close enough to discourage excess. This diet shocks outsiders. Settled peoples associate civilization with bread, grain, and agriculture. Mongols associate survival with flexibility. Grain ties you to land. Animals move. This matters when armies travel thousands of kilometers. Mongol forces do not carry large supply trains. They do not need to seize granaries immediately. They can bypass cities entirely, living off pasture and livestock along the way. This is not abundance. It is balance. Camp life follows strict routines. Tents are arranged carefully. Animals are managed methodically. Tasks are divided by age and gender, not by status. Children herd. Women manage logistics. Men prepare for riding and fighting. Elderly members preserve knowledge and arbitrate disputes. There is little leisure. There is also little separation between civilian and military life. War is an extension of movement, not a disruption. Because of this, mobilization is fast. There is no dramatic call to arms. People are already armed, already mounted, already organized. When orders arrive, camps simply redirect their movement. To settled empires, this feels like sudden invasion. To Mongols, it feels like a seasonal adjustment. The simplicity of this lifestyle also limits ambition. You cannot hoard much when everything you own must be transported. Wealth takes the form of animals, not objects. Prestige comes from loyalty and effectiveness, not display. This has consequences for leadership. A Khan who demands luxury quickly loses support. He slows everyone down. Genghis Khan understands this deeply. He lives much like his followers. He eats the same food. He travels the same way. This reinforces legitimacy. As conquest brings access to wealth, restraint becomes harder. Silk, silver, spices, these temptations test the system. But in the early years, discipline holds. Excess is discouraged. Spoils are redistributed. Hoarding is punished. This is not ideology. It is memory. Everyone remembers hunger. As you listen, notice how unremarkable this all sounds. No speeches. No visions. Just routine survival. And yet, this way of life allows Mongol forces to operate where others collapse. Deserts, frozen plains, distant frontiers, these are not barriers, just environments. Which leads to a quiet but important thought. Empires usually depend on complexity. The Mongol Empire depends on simplicity carried to its extreme. And simplicity scales better than anyone expects. Discipline in everyday life. Once you understand how little the Mongols need, the next thing to notice is how carefully they manage even that little. Survival on the steppe is not about toughness alone. It is about restraint. Every habit is shaped to reduce risk, waste, and internal conflict. Daily life follows patterns that rarely change. Animals are moved at predictable times. Camps are broken and rebuilt in familiar ways. Food is rationed according to need, not preference. This predictability is comforting in a landscape that offers few guarantees. You should not imagine this as joyless. There is music, storytelling, laughter. But pleasure never overrides practicality. Excess today means hunger tomorrow. Discipline begins early. Children are taught to endure cold, hunger, and boredom. These are not framed as hardships to be avoided, but as conditions to be managed. Complaining does not improve outcomes. Adaptation does. This mindset transfers directly into military effectiveness. Soldiers who are used to discomfort are less likely to panic when supplies run low. Units that live together year-round develop quiet coordination. Orders do not need to be shouted. People know what to do because they have done similar things in daily life. The Mongol camp functions like a moving workshop. Saddles are repaired constantly. Weapons are maintained. Horses are checked for injury. Everyone participates. There is no sharp line between labor and readiness. The Yasa reinforces this discipline in small ways. Waste is punished. Carelessness is punished. Disrespect toward shared resources is punished. These are not moral failings, they are threats to group survival. One example often mentioned by chroniclers is water use. Polluting water sources is forbidden. Washing in rivers in certain ways is restricted. These rules seem obsessive to outsiders, but disease can destroy a mobile society faster than any enemy. Food sharing is also regulated. Meat from hunts is distributed according to rule, not strength. This prevents disputes. It also ensures that weaker members survive, preserving long-term manpower. As the empire expands, this disciplined lifestyle travels with the army. Mongol camps outside foreign cities look alien to locals. No sprawling tent cities. No luxury. Just order and movement. This confuses observers. They expect conquerors to indulge. Instead, they see restraint. This makes Mongol intentions harder to read. It also sustains momentum. Armies do not stall waiting for supplies or comforts. However, pressure begins to build beneath the surface. Conquest brings wealth. Tribute flows in. Foreign goods accumulate. Silk, ceramics, gold, and spices enter Mongol camps. At first, these items are redistributed or ignored. But habits slowly change. Some commanders begin to settle temporarily. Some families acquire more than they can easily move. The tension between mobility and accumulation grows. Genghis Khan is aware of this risk. He resists permanent capitals. He discourages luxury. He keeps movement constant. But systems evolve despite intention. Still, during his lifetime, simplicity remains dominant. The empire moves because it is not weighed down by its own success. This balance, between necessity and temptation, is fragile. As you lie with this idea, consider how rarely history rewards restraint. Most societies collapse not from poverty, but from abundance they cannot manage. The Mongols, for a time, manage it by refusing to change too quickly. But you can already sense the question forming. Messengers who never slept. Speed is power. Empires usually imagine power as something heavy. Stone walls. Archives. Palaces. Capitals that sit in one place and wait to be obeyed. The Mongol Empire works the opposite way. Its power moves. And nothing shows this more clearly than its messengers. If you stand still long enough in Mongol territory, someone will pass you at speed. This is the YAM system, the Mongol relay network. It is not dramatic. There are no parades or uniforms. Just riders, horses, and stations placed at regular intervals across thousands of kilometers. At each station, fresh horses wait. Food waits. Shelter waits. The messenger does not rest. He changes mounts and rides on. Orders that would take months in other empires travel in days. This changes everything. You are used to thinking of communication as secondary to power. For the Mongols, communication is power. An army that moves fast but receives slow orders becomes dangerous to itself. A ruler who cannot respond quickly loses relevance. Genghis Khan understands this instinctively. The YAM allows him to rule without being everywhere. Decisions made in one place shape events far away before local conditions can shift too much. Rebellions are detected early. Supplies are redirected. Commanders are praised or replaced. Speed compresses distance. The system is tightly regulated. Only authorized messengers may use relay horses. Abuse is punished severely. This is not a convenience service. It is state infrastructure. You should imagine the discipline required to maintain it. Horses must be fed. Stations must be staffed. Routes must be protected. All of this happens without cities, without fixed borders, across terrain that would defeat most bureaucracies. And yet, it works. Foreign observers are astonished. A message sent from Central Asia reaches China faster than Imperial Chinese couriers could manage within their own territory. This is not because Mongols are cleverer, but because they remove friction. No paperwork delays. No ceremonial pauses. No waiting for permission. The message itself is often short. Commands are clear. Ambiguity is avoided. The Yasa supports this by defining authority sharply. A message does not invite debate. It instructs. This speed affects warfare directly. Mongol armies coordinate movements across vast distances. Separate columns converge precisely. Feigned retreats are synchronized. Reinforcements arrive unexpectedly. Enemies misjudge timing constantly. They expect delays. They plan around slow communication. The Mongols arrive before plans mature. But the YAM is not only military. It carries census data, tribute reports, intelligence. It connects administrators who have never met. It creates a sense, subtle but real, that the empire is present everywhere at once. This presence discourages rebellion. Not because Mongols patrol every village, but because response feels inevitable. There is a cost. Local populations are required to support relay stations. Horses are requisitioned. Labor is demanded. This breeds resentment. But the system is so valuable that it is protected fiercely. Even Genghis Khan's relatives are punished if they misuse it. You may notice something quietly modern here. The Mongols build an empire not by building walls, but by building networks. Control flows through connection rather than occupation. As you settle into this thought, consider how different history might look if speed had always mattered this much. If rulers had always heard bad news early. If orders had always arrived before conditions changed. If distance had never offered protection. An empire held together by horses. Once the YAM is established, the Mongol Empire begins to feel less like a loose collection of conquered territories and more like a single organism. Not unified by culture or language, but by response time. When something happens anywhere, someone elsewhere knows about it quickly. This changes how everyone behaves. Commanders take fewer independent risks. They know their actions will be reported. Local administrators hesitate before cheating. They know audits can arrive unexpectedly. Even distant relatives of the ruling family behave more cautiously, aware that privilege no longer guarantees privacy. Speed creates accountability. The relay stations themselves become quiet centers of power. They are not impressive, no walls, no ornament, but they matter. To damage one is to interrupt the flow of authority. As a result, they are guarded, maintained, and repaired quickly. The Mongols understand something subtle: controlling communication is often more effective than controlling land. You do not need to occupy every village if you can respond to any disturbance faster than it can spread. This also allows the empire to scale. As territories expand, the YAM expands with them. New routes are added. Old ones are reinforced. Geography is reshaped into corridors of movement. Foreign merchants benefit from this system. Trade becomes safer. Caravans travel with official passes. Banditry is punished harshly. Information about markets spreads. For a time, Eurasian experiences something close to integrated trade. This period is later called the Pax Mongolia. It is not peaceful in a moral sense, but it is predictable. Violence exists, but it is regulated. Routes remain open. For ordinary people, this is confusing. The Mongols arrive violently, then impose order. They destroy, then stabilize. The speed of these transitions is disorienting. The YAM also spreads ideas unintentionally. Technologies move. Gunpowder knowledge travels west. Medical practices move east. Maps improve. The empire becomes a conduit. But there are limits. The system depends on constant maintenance. Horses age. Routes decay. Local resentment grows. Supporting relay stations is a burden, especially in settled regions unused to such demands. As Genghis Khan ages, more responsibility falls on subordinates. Speed remains, but judgment begins to vary. Some commanders abuse the system. Others hesitate. The yam amplifies good decisions, and bad ones. You should notice the paradox. The very system that makes the empire strong also makes it fragile. Centralized speed means mistakes propagate quickly. This is not yet fatal. Under strong leadership, errors are corrected. But the risk is present. As you lie with this idea, think about how power changes when distance disappears. Women who managed the empire. Power that did not need a throne. When people imagine the Mongol Empire, they usually imagine men on horseback, armored, shouting, moving fast. Women appear only as background figures, if they appear at all. This is a mistake. Not because Mongol society was equal in the modern sense, it was not, but because the empire could not function without women exercising real, sustained power. And not symbolic power. Practical power. On the steppe, absence is normal. Men leave for raids, campaigns, seasonal movements, and sometimes do not return. Someone must keep life running in the meantime. In Mongol society, that responsibility falls to women by default, not exception. You manage herds. You organize camps. You negotiate marriages. You resolve disputes. You remember alliances. You decide when to move and where. These are not secondary tasks. They are governance. A woman who fails at them risks starvation for everyone. This prepares Mongol women for something unusual when empire begins, administration at scale. When Genghis Khan and his generals ride west or south, they leave territories behind. Those territories still need order. Taxes must be collected. Supplies must be stored. Messengers must be received. Local elites must be monitored. Wives, mothers, and daughters of the ruling family do this work. They do not rule because of ideology. They rule because someone must, and they are already trained by life to do so. One of the most important figures in this story is Burda, Genghis Khan's wife. Chroniclers say little about her personality, which is itself telling. What they do record is her position. She oversees camps, distributes resources, and represents authority in the Khan's absence. Her son's legitimacy depends on her status. Her decisions shape succession politics. She is not visible in battle narratives, but she is present in the empire's continuity. As the empire expands, women of the ruling house are given responsibility over entire regions. They supervise tribute collection. They control trade routes. They act as intermediaries between Mongol commanders and local administrators. This is not temporary caretaking. Some women rule for decades. You should imagine this not as exception but as system. Mongol governance does not require constant presence of male leaders. It requires reliability. Women provide it. Foreign observers notice this and are disturbed. In Confucian China and the Islamic world, female political authority is limited and often concealed. Among the Mongols, it is open and unapologetic. This creates friction. Some local elites resist taking orders from women. Mongol policy does not accommodate this discomfort. Orders are orders. Women also play a critical role in succession crises. When a Khan dies, the empire does not immediately pass to an heir. A regent governs. Often, that regent is a woman. These regencies are not passive. They issue commands, lead councils, and make strategic decisions. Some are more effective than the Khans they replace. This period after Genghis Khan's death will show this clearly, but the groundwork is laid early. Authority in the Mongol system is not tied to gender as tightly as in settled societies. It is tied to position, trust, and capability. You should not romanticize this. Mongol women live hard lives. They work constantly. They are subject to arranged marriages and political alliances. Their power exists within constraints. But it exists. And it matters. The empire's ability to expand continuously, without collapsing every time leaders leave or die, depends on this distributed authority. Women ensure continuity while men pursue conquest. As you rest with this thought, consider how different this is from the usual image of empire. Cities that open their gates, choosing survival over glory. Most cities that encountered the Mongols did not fall in fire and screams. That part of the story is remembered because it is loud. What is forgotten are the quieter moments, councils held at night, doors unbarred at dawn, keys handed over without ceremony. These are the cities that open their gates. To understand why they did, you have to stop thinking in terms of honor and start thinking in terms of arithmetic. Cities are not symbols to the people who live in them. They are storage systems. Food, families, workshops, debts, obligations. Losing a city is not just losing walls, it is losing continuity. When Mongol envoys arrive, they rarely threaten at first. They explain terms. Submit, provide tribute, allow a garrison or governor, continue your life. Resist, and destruction follows. The message is not poetic. It is procedural. Many rulers dismiss it as bluff. Then refugees arrive. They do not bring detailed reports. They bring fragments. A city that no longer exists. Fields burned. Survivors scattered. And most importantly, a pattern. Cities that resisted were destroyed. Cities that surrendered early were spared. This pattern matters more than ideology. Inside city walls, debates unfold. Military commanders argue for resistance. Religious leaders call for faith. Merchants calculate losses. Ordinary people worry about water supplies, grain stores, children. You should imagine these discussions not as dramatic speeches, but as exhausted conversations. People know their walls are old. They know relief armies are far away. They know their rulers are unreliable. The Mongols understand this psychology well. They give time. Not endless time, but enough. Waiting costs them little. Their armies are mobile. Their supplies are flexible. Time favors them. Opening the gates is not surrender in the emotional sense. It is a transaction. Cities that submit are often allowed to keep their local elites. Taxes may be standardized rather than increased. Trade resumes quickly. Craftsmen continue their work. Religious practices remain untouched. This is not kindness. It is stability management. From the Mongol perspective, a functioning city is more valuable than ruins. Tribute flows better from living people. Markets generate information. Roads remain useful. But submission is not painless. Hostages are taken. Census takers arrive. Tribute is assessed precisely. Skilled workers may be relocated. Young men may be conscripted. Autonomy shrinks. Still, compared to annihilation, this feels survivable. You should notice something unsettling here. The Mongols do not force every city to fight. They let cities choose. And then they enforce the consequences so consistently that choice becomes predictable. This turns fear into policy. As news spreads, more cities open their gates without waiting for siege. Some even send envoys preemptively. They trade independence for survival before Mongol armies arrive. Empires built on pride struggle to respond to this. Their legitimacy depends on resistance. If cities submit quietly, imperial authority dissolves without battle. This is how vast regions change hands with surprisingly little fighting. Not because people love the Mongols, but because they fear the alternative more. As you rest with this idea, consider how rarely history rewards quiet decisions. These cities survive, but they disappear from heroic narratives. Their leaders are remembered as cowards. Their populations are forgotten entirely. Yet their choice preserves lives. Cities that refused. When walls chose destruction. Not every city opened its gates. Some refused, not out of ignorance, but out of conviction. Pride mattered. Faith mattered. Reputation mattered. And sometimes rulers believed that if they resisted long enough, help would arrive, alliances would hold, or the Mongols would move on. They were wrong often enough that the pattern became unmistakable. When a city refused, the Mongols did not rush. They prepared. Siege is not exciting in the way battle is. It is waiting. It is counting grain and water. It is watching morale decay. The Mongols were patient because patience saved lives, their lives. They encircled, cut routes, and settled in. Engineers assembled machines. Earthworks rose slowly. The city was allowed to exhaust itself. Inside the walls, life narrowed. Food was rationed. Water grew stale. Rumors multiplied. Discipline cracked. Commanders argued. Civilians blamed leaders. Leaders blamed fate. You should imagine the soundscape: less shouting, more coughing. Less movement, more stillness. Siege kills quietly long before violence arrives. The Mongols exploited this with method. They rotated troops so no one fatigued. They kept horses grazing beyond range. They maintained communication through the yam. They waited for the city to weaken itself. If the city still refused, punishment followed, deliberate, not impulsive. Chroniclers describe mass killings, and these accounts are not exaggerations. But the purpose was not rage. It was instruction. A city that refused after knowing the pattern was treated as an example. Survivors, if any, were spared specifically to carry news. Fear was not collateral damage. It was the objective. This predictability is what made resistance so rare after the first waves. Once the rule was understood: submit early and live, resist and be erased, choices narrowed. The Mongols did not need to threaten every city. Memory did the work. Yet refusal was not always irrational. Some cities had religious obligations to resist. Some rulers believed surrender meant divine punishment. Others feared their own people more than the Mongols. Opening the gates might spark revolt. In those cases, resistance was chosen not because it was likely to succeed, but because it was the only option left. You should not romanticize this either. Heroism does not feed children. Walls do not cure disease. And relief armies, when they came at all, often arrived too late. The Mongols learned from each siege. Techniques improved. Intelligence sharpened. What began as adaptation became routine. Each refusal shortened the next siege. And so the empire advanced not just by strength, but by reducing uncertainty. The cost of refusal became known in advance. Once known, it became avoidable. As you sit with this, consider how strange it is that history celebrates resistance more than survival. Cities that refused are remembered. Cities that open their gates fade into ledgers and tax rolls. Trade protected by violence. Roads that stayed open. Empires usually talk about peace as something that follows war. For the Mongols, peace is something you enforce continuously, especially along roads. Not peace as calm, but peace as predictability. If goods move reliably, the empire functions. If they do not, nothing else matters. Long before the Mongols rule cities, they rely on trade. The steppe cannot produce silk, grain, metal tools, or fine cloth. It can produce animals and movement. Trade fills the gap. This makes Mongol leaders unusually attentive to merchants. Not because they admire commerce, but because commerce stabilizes power. When the empire expands, this instinct scales up. Caravan routes that once passed through hostile borders and unreliable tolls now pass through one authority. The Mongols do not eliminate danger, they monopolize it. Violence becomes regulated. Banditry is punished harshly, not out of concern for victims, but because uncontrolled violence disrupts revenue. You begin to see the pattern: what threatens order is crushed, what supports flow is protected. Merchants are given passes. These are not symbolic documents. They are guarantees backed by force. A caravan carrying such a pass is under Mongol protection. Interfering with it invites punishment that few are willing to risk. This protection is not free. Taxes are collected. Information is demanded. Merchants become informal intelligence gatherers. They report road conditions, local unrest, market changes. In return, they move faster and safer than ever before. You should imagine the relief this brings. Roads that were once dangerous become routine. Travel times shrink. Markets connect across continents. Goods appear in places where they have never been seen. This period is later remembered as prosperity, but it is built on fear. Everyone knows that safety exists because retaliation is swift. The same force that destroys cities protects caravans. This duality confuses observers. How can the same empire that annihilates populations also safeguard trade? The answer is simple: both actions serve stability. The Mongols do not moralize commerce. They regulate it. Prices fluctuate. Taxes adjust. Routes shift. The state intervenes only when disruption threatens flow. Local elites are often surprised to find that Mongol taxes are sometimes lighter than previous regimes. This is not generosity. High taxes reduce trade volume. Lower, predictable taxes increase it. The Mongols prefer a steady stream to short-term extraction. Violence still exists along these roads, but it is purposeful. Rebels are punished. Smugglers are crushed. Officials who extort merchants are executed publicly. These acts send signals. Do business within the system and you are safe. Operate outside it and you are not. You should notice how impersonal this feels. There is no celebration of wealth, no merchant class rising to political power. Trade is a tool, not a virtue. It keeps the empire supplied, informed, and connected. As goods move, ideas move with them. Technologies spread. Beliefs travel. Languages mix. None of this is planned. The empire does not care what people think, only that roads remain open and obedience remains intact. This creates a strange calm across vast distances. Not peace as absence of fear, but peace as absence of surprise. As you settle into this, consider how fragile this arrangement is. It depends on constant enforcement. It depends on trust in punishment. It depends on roads staying open. Religion without conversion. Belief that was left alone. Most empires expand with a message. A god to accept. A law to obey. A way of life to imitate. The Mongol Empire does something stranger. It conquers without asking you to believe anything at all. This is not tolerance in the modern sense. It is indifference. On the steppe, belief has always been personal and flexible. Spirits inhabit rivers, mountains, ancestors. Shamans speak, but they do not rule. There is no single doctrine that defines belonging. Survival matters more than theology. Genghis Khan grows up in this environment, and it shapes how he views religion, not as truth to be imposed, but as a force to be managed. When the Mongols encounter the great religious systems of Eurasia, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, they do not try to replace them. They do not debate doctrine. They do not demand conversion. They simply ask one question: does this belief interfere with obedience? If the answer is no, the belief is left alone. Mosques remain open. Churches continue services. Monasteries are protected. Priests, monks, and imams are often exempted from taxation. This shocks settled societies used to religious hierarchy tied to state power. For many conquered peoples, this feels like relief. Previous rulers taxed religious institutions heavily or used them to enforce loyalty. The Mongols do neither consistently. Faith becomes private again, separated from governance. This separation is deliberate. Religion is allowed because it divides populations rather than unites them. Different beliefs coexist under Mongol rule, but they do not combine into a single resistance movement. No faith can claim moral authority over the empire. The Mongols also exploit religious competition quietly. They invite representatives of different faiths to court debates, not to find truth, but to observe loyalty. Who argues respectfully? Who insults rivals? Who accepts Mongol authority without complaint? Those who cooperate gain favor. Those who insist on exclusivity lose influence. Genghis Khan himself participates in rituals when useful, but he never commits fully. He consults shamans, listens to monks, respects holy men, but remains unbound. His authority does not come from heaven. It comes from enforcement. This unsettles religious elites. A ruler who does not claim divine legitimacy cannot be challenged on spiritual grounds. There is no doctrine to refute. No blasphemy to accuse. Religion becomes invisible to power. As the empire expands, this policy remains consistent. Even when Mongols adopt local religions later, the state does not. Personal belief shifts, but imperial practice stays neutral. This neutrality encourages exchange. Scholars travel. Clerics debate. Ideas move along the same roads as goods. The empire becomes a quarter of belief, not a battleground. But there is a cost. Because the Mongols do not care what people believe, they also do not care deeply about religious protection beyond usefulness. Sacred sites are spared until they are not. Clergy are respected until they resist. Tolerance exists only within obedience. As you rest with this idea, consider how unusual this is in history. An empire that rules without demanding belief. That allows gods to coexist under one authority. Fear is administration. Order that did not argue. When people say the Mongols ruled through fear, they usually imagine chaos, screaming armies, burning cities, uncontrolled brutality. That image is incomplete. Fear, in the Mongol Empire, is not emotional outburst. It is administrative method. It is calm. It is repetitive. It is predictable. Fear is not used everywhere, all the time. It is used precisely where uncertainty threatens control. And once used, it is remembered, which means it does not need to be repeated often. This is what makes it effective. You begin to see this in how punishments are carried out. They are public. They are unmistakable. They are never explained emotionally. No speeches. No moral justification. Just consequence. A governor cheats on taxes. He is executed. A city revolts after submitting. It is erased. A commander disobeys orders. He is removed, sometimes killed. No appeals. No exceptions. The purpose is not cruelty. It is clarity. People do not wonder what might happen if they disobey. They already know. The empire does not negotiate with uncertainty. It removes it. This creates a strange calm. In many regions, daily life under Mongol rule becomes less arbitrary than under previous regimes. Local elites may hate the Mongols, but they understand them. Taxes are assessed once and enforced consistently. Orders are clear. Punishment follows rules, not moods. Fear replaces bureaucracy. Where other empires rely on paperwork, courts, and endless negotiation, the Mongols rely on memory. Everyone remembers what happened to the last person who crossed a line. That memory governs behavior more efficiently than laws few people can read. You should notice something important here. Fear is not spread randomly. Random violence creates resistance. Predictable violence creates compliance. The Mongols learn this quickly. Early campaigns include excess destruction. Later ones are more selective. Violence becomes targeted, instructional. One city destroyed carefully saves 10 sieges later. This is why Mongol campaigns accelerate. Not because armies grow larger, but because resistance collapses faster. Administrators understand this instinctively. A tax collector does not need guards if punishment for interference is known. A messenger travels safely not because roads are peaceful, but because harming him invites retribution. Even foreign elites adapt. They comply not because they agree, but because disagreement has no strategic value. This does not mean rebellion disappears. It means rebellion becomes desperate. When it happens, it is total. And when it fails, Consequences are final. Fear also travels faster than armies. Refugees carry stories. Merchants whisper details. Rumors exaggerate, but exaggeration helps the system. The Mongols rarely correct it. You might find this uncomfortable, and you should. This is governance stripped of justification. No moral narrative. No promise of improvement. Only order enforced by certainty. The Mongols in China. Conquest meets complexity. When the Mongols turn fully toward China, they encounter something they have never faced at this scale, a civilization that is not just wealthy, but administratively dense. Walls are higher. Records are older. Officials are trained for decades to do nothing but manage other people's work. This is not a frontier to raid. It is a system to absorb, or break. You should picture northern China in the early 13th century as layered rather than unified. The Jin dynasty rules the north, the Song dynasty governs the south. Between them lie rivers, canals, tax registers, granaries, and a population accustomed to written law and bureaucratic routine. Authority here is slow, formal, and paper-heavy. At first, the Mongols underestimate none of this. They probe rather than plunge. Raids test responses. Envoys gauge etiquette. Intelligence accumulates patiently. Genghis Khan understands that destroying China outright would be wasteful. Its value lies in production and knowledge. Still, war comes. Chinese fortifications blunt Mongol speed. Walls stop horses. Crossbows outrange steppe bows from behind parapets. Siege is unavoidable, and costly. The Mongols adapt by doing what they do best, borrowing. Engineers are captured and compelled to work. Techniques spread from city to city. Siegecraft becomes routine rather than exceptional. This is not a sudden transformation. It is incremental, boring, and relentless. Cities fall not because Mongols are more violent than others, but because pressure never lifts. When one city falls, its engineers build machines for the next. When one defense fails, its weakness becomes instruction. Over time, resistance becomes expensive to repeat. Inside conquered areas, Mongol governance looks restrained. Local officials are kept, supervised closely. Taxes are standardized. Registers are used because they exist, not because Mongols admire them. Paper becomes a tool, not a tradition. This creates tension. Chinese elites are unused to rulers who do not care about ritual legitimacy. The Mongols do not perform Confucian virtue. They do not pretend to be cultured in the expected ways. They demand results. For ordinary people, this feels confusing. The conquerors are foreign and often brutal in war, yet oddly hands-off afterward. Markets reopen. Farming resumes. Temples remain. But pressure is constant. Tribute flows. Labor is requisitioned. Skilled artisans are relocated. The state becomes more extractive, even as daily life appears stable. You should notice how different this is from steppe conquest. China does not collapse quickly. It absorbs blows, repairs damage, and continues. The Mongols learn that conquest here is measured in years, not seasons. They also learn something else: ruling China requires becoming something new. Speed alone is not enough. Memory-based law is insufficient. Networks must interface with bureaucracy. Mobility must coexist with permanence. The Mongols in the Islamic world. When order met memory. When Mongol armies move west into the Islamic world, they do not enter an empty space or a fragile frontier. They enter a civilization that remembers itself vividly. Cities here are not just administrative centers, they are repositories of law, scholarship, faith, and history. Libraries matter. Lineages matter. Written memory matters. This makes the encounter different from anything the Mongols have faced before. From Central Asia through Persia and into Mesopotamia, Islamic polities govern through texts, legal opinions, contracts, tax records, theological debate. Authority is layered. Sultans rule alongside scholars, judges interpret law independent of rulers, Merchants operate through networks of trust reinforced by religious norms. It is a civilization accustomed to argument. The Mongols are not. Their authority does not persuade. It compels. Their law is remembered, not debated. Their legitimacy does not depend on scholarship or lineage within the conquered society. This mismatch produces shock on both sides. At first, Islamic rulers misunderstand the threat. They see raids, not systems. They assume the Mongols will behave like previous steppe invaders, arrive, loot, depart. They prepare armies for set peace battles and fortify cities expecting negotiation or withdrawal. Instead, the Mongols stay. They study roads, water, grain routes, caravan patterns. They identify which cities feed others. They isolate before they strike. The campaigns are methodical. Each conquest simplifies the next. You should imagine how unsettling this feels to populations used to legal process and mediation. There is no appeal to shared norms. No argument from scripture matters. Envoys are listened to, but not debated with. Terms are offered. Choices are limited. Submission preserves life and property, for now. Resistance invites eradication. Some cities submit early and survive relatively intact. Their elites are retained. Courts continue. Mosques function. Taxes are heavy but predictable. Trade resumes under Mongol protection. Others refuse. Here, memory collides with administration. Cities like Nishapur, Marv, and later Baghdad resist for reasons that make sense within Islamic political culture: honor, legitimacy, fear of internal revolt, belief that a great city cannot simply vanish. When they fall, the destruction is total enough to echo for generations. Chroniclers record the deaths with horror. Libraries burn. Scholars are killed or dispersed. Irrigation systems collapse. These are not incidental losses. They unravel local order. Recovery takes centuries. The Mongols do not target knowledge intentionally, but they do not protect it unless it serves function. A library does not feed horses. A scholar does not maintain roads. Artisans with technical skills are spared, theologians rarely are. This is not hatred of Islam. It is indifference to what does not support control. And yet, even here, adaptation begins. Mongol rulers soon realize that governing the Islamic world requires expertise they do not possess. Persian administrators are retained. Tax systems are refined. Written records are used. Islamic law continues for local populations, even as Mongol authority stands above it. Over time, Mongol elites convert to Islam, not as conquerors submitting to the conquered, but as rulers aligning with the most effective system for governing where they now live. This happens gradually, unevenly, and without central mandate. Belief follows administration. For ordinary people, this transition is disorienting. The invaders destroy violently, then govern pragmatically. They break the old order, then borrow from it. They rule without reverence, then adopt faith selectively. The result is neither continuity nor complete rupture. It is a layered domination that preserves surface familiarity while altering power completely. As you sit with this story, notice the quiet tragedy beneath the headlines. The Islamic world does not fall because it is weak. It falls because it is structured in ways that assume shared norms, and the Mongols do not share them. Death of Genghis Khan. The end that was not explained. Genghis Khan does not die the way founders of empires are supposed to die. There is no public farewell. No carefully recorded final speech. No official account that settles the matter. His death, like much of his life, is deliberately obscured. This is not an accident. It is policy. By the time Genghis Khan reaches his mid-60s, the empire stretches farther than anyone living can fully comprehend. Armies are active thousands of kilometers apart. Messengers ride constantly. Orders still come in his name, and obedience still follows. The system works because the center appears stable. A visible, discussed death would threaten that stability. So when Genghis Khan dies in 1227, during a campaign against the Western Xia, the empire does not stop. There is no pause for mourning that outsiders can observe. Armies continue moving. Governors continue enforcing orders. The machinery runs as if nothing has happened. Even the cause of death is uncertain. Some sources suggest illness. Others mention a fall from a horse. A few later accounts hint at wounds or internal injury. None can be verified. The Mongols themselves make no effort to clarify. What matters is not how he dies, but that no one is allowed to use his death as leverage. You should imagine this moment carefully. A man who has reshaped half the world disappears, and the world is not informed. The body is returned secretly. The funeral is private. According to tradition, those who encounter the procession are killed to preserve secrecy. Whether this happened exactly as described is debated, but the intent is clear: the location of his tomb must remain unknown. Even in death, Genghis Khan refuses to become a symbol that others can claim. There is no mausoleum, no monument, no shrine. His grave is meant to vanish back into the steppe, unmarked and unrecoverable. This aligns perfectly with his worldview. Land is temporary. Power moves. Memory is controlled. This decision has consequences. Without a public death, there is no focal point for grief or rebellion. Rivals cannot gather around a tomb. No one can claim proximity to his remains as legitimacy. Authority must flow through process, not relic. At the same time, the absence creates uncertainty. Who now speaks with final authority? Which orders remain valid? How long can the illusion of continuity last? Succession in the Mongol system is never automatic. The empire is considered collective property of the ruling family. A new Khan must be chosen through a kurultai. Until then, regents govern. Armies wait. Decisions are made cautiously. But even here, Genghis Khan has prepared as much as possible. He has named successors for specific roles. He has divided territories among sons and grandsons. He has ensured that no single individual can immediately dominate the whole. This avoids instant civil war, but it also guarantees future tension. As the news of his death eventually spreads, reactions vary. Some regions remain calm. Others test boundaries. Small revolts flare and are crushed quickly. The system proves resilient, but not effortless. For ordinary people, nothing dramatic happens at first. Taxes are still collected. Laws are still enforced. Fear still works. The empire continues. This is perhaps Genghis Khan's final achievement. He builds a system that does not collapse when he disappears. And yet, something essential is gone. The Yausen lacks its ultimate interpreter. Authority begins to fragment. Precedent replaces judgment. Memory competes with ambition. As you sit with this quiet ending, notice how different it is from the legends. No blaze of glory. No heroic last stand. Just disappearance. The empire without its founder. Holding together what was never meant to be still. After the death of Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire does something that surprises nearly everyone who watches it from the outside. It does not fall apart. There is no immediate civil war. No dramatic collapse. No sudden loss of control. Armies remain disciplined. Governors continue their work. Tribute still flows. Orders are obeyed. From a distance, it looks as if nothing has changed. But if you listen closely, you can hear the difference. It is not loud. It is procedural. The empire now runs without the one person whose judgment once resolved ambiguity. The Yausen still exists, but interpretation begins to vary. Commanders who once waited for confirmation now act more independently. Regents speak carefully, aware that every decision may later be questioned. This is what succession really looks like in a system built on movement and memory, not chaos, but hesitation. The Mongols managed this transition through a familiar mechanism, the kurultai. Representatives of the ruling family and key commanders gather to choose the next great Khan. This takes time. Distance matters. Weather matters. Ambition waits. While the empire waits, regents rule. Often, these regents are women of the ruling family, wives and daughters of Genghis Khan, who have already managed territories during campaigns. They are experienced, cautious, and pragmatic. Their authority is accepted because it preserves continuity. Still, everyone knows this is temporary. The empire is also divided more clearly now. Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons govern vast regions semi-autonomously. Each Ulus develops its own priorities. The Golden Horde looks west. The Chagatai realm focuses on Central Asia. The Ilkhanate grows in Persia. The Yuan focus deepens in China. At first, this looks like decentralization, not fragmentation. Loyalty to the Great Khan remains real. Tribute is sent. Military support is expected. The yam still connects the system. But distance begins to matter in new ways. Local conditions shape governance more strongly. Mongol elites adopt local customs. Administrative languages differ. Religions influence policy. The empire becomes less uniform, more adaptive, and more divided. This is not decay yet. It is transformation. Conquest continues. Expansion even accelerates in some regions. New rulers seek legitimacy through success. Victories silence rivals. Momentum replaces unity. But the cost of this is subtle. Coordination weakens. Shared memory of the steppe fades among elites born into palaces rather than tents. The habits of scarcity give way to habits of management. The empire becomes better at ruling places, and worse at remembering why it once moved. You should imagine this period not as decline, but as drift. Systems still work. Roads stay open. Fear still enforces order. But the simplicity that once made everything coherent is gone. What the Mongols left behind. When the Mongols stop expanding, nothing dramatic announces it. There is no final defeat, no single treaty, no moment when the world collectively exhales. The horses simply ride less often. Orders take longer to arrive. Regions begin to look inward. The empire does not end, it thins. This makes the Mongol legacy difficult to see. Most empires leave ruins. Temples, roads, inscriptions, laws carved in stone. The Mongols leave fewer visible traces. Their capital cities shift. Their monuments are minimal. Their founder's grave remains unknown. What they leave behind is structural rather than physical. Start with distance. Before the Mongols, Eurasia is fragmented. Trade exists, but it is risky, slow, and regional. After the Mongols, routes connect China to the Mediterranean with a degree of reliability never seen before. Even when Mongol power fades, the pathways remain known. Maps improve. Expectations change. Then consider administration. The Mongols demonstrate that vast territories can be ruled without uniform culture, religion, or law. This idea outlives them. Later empires borrow selectively, tolerance without equality, decentralization without freedom, control without conversion. They also change warfare permanently. Speed becomes central. Intelligence becomes indispensable. Psychological impact becomes as important as physical force. Later armies imitate pieces of Mongol practice, mobility, scouting, coordinated movement, even when fighting in completely different environments. No one forgets how devastating unpredictability can be. There is also loss. Entire regions in Central Asia and the Islamic world never fully recover from Mongol destruction. Irrigation systems collapse and are not rebuilt. Cities shrink or vanish. Intellectual traditions are interrupted. Knowledge survives, but continuity breaks. This is not accidental. The Mongols do not value continuity unless it serves function. When systems collapse, they are replaced only if useful. For ordinary people, the legacy is mixed. Some live under Mongol rule and experience lighter taxation and safer roads. Others lose families, homes, and futures. The empire does not offer redemption or meaning. It offers outcomes. Even the Mongols themselves are changed. Their descendants ruled China as emperors, Persia as Muslim kings, Russia as distant overlords. They stop being nomads. They build capitals. They write laws. They become what they once defeated. You should notice the irony here. The Mongols conquer the world without becoming like it, then keep the world by becoming part of it. In doing so, they dissolve the very conditions that made their rise possible. What remains is influence without presence. As you sit with this final arc, consider how history usually remembers conquerors, as villains or heroes, destroyers or founders. The Mongols resist this simplicity. They are neither civilizers nor mere barbarians. They are accelerants.